Trigger warning, it's 2020. If you're watching this video from some point in the distant future and you're young, that will mean very little. But for everyone else, the year of the coronavirus pandemic. I'd love to have something profound to say about 2020 which would somehow reframe it, tidy it up, make it better. But no, it was a shit show. A time that, from now, looking back, we try to cordon off, give a wide berth, minimise, forget about. This series, I'm afraid, isn't going to let me do that. So consider this my response to the forward question we asked everybody going through it at the time. How was your lockdown? Disaster was clearly looming from very early on in the year, so we, wisely as it happens, brought forward our trip to Wales to see my folks to the February half-term break. A good thing, because lockdown arrived in late March, too late as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't see my family again other than on a screen for over a year. Within that time, I missed my sister's wedding, which was an extremely low-key affair, and my uncle's funeral, which I managed to watch via a live stream. So basically, a year at home. My son homeschooling, his school, give them credit, were amazingly well organised. Remote learning, virtual lessons, the works. And he was a trooper, a rock. He rolled with all the punches and kept his head up. I'm immensely proud of him. My wife had some very difficult challenges to deal with. Her mum, my mother-in-law, still living independently, had been diagnosed with dementia in January of this year. And the rapidly changing situations, lockdowns, bubbles, our values, tiers, regulations, guidelines, were just too much for her in her deteriorating state. So Michelle spent a lot of the year helping her. Visits every few days, shopping, cleaning, supporting. In and out of an apartment block full of elderly, infirm, very vulnerable residents, hyper aware of the danger of bringing the virus into a high-risk environment. I just kind of held things down a bit at home, learned how to cook and bake some new things, pizzas, Indian curries, comfort food basically. If there's an upside to any of this year, it's that we got to spend a lot of time together and help each other through it. We bought a massive TV early on. What else was there to do? And immersed ourselves in lighter, funnier entertainment. A lot of it on YouTube, the Remix Bros, old SNL skits, special mention for both the Californians and the phenomenally silly Barry Gibb talk show. Gaming stuff, comedy stuff, music stuff, review stuff. It was the period when I started taking more notice of the range of content on YouTube, and when I began to think that maybe it was something I could try my hand at. That impulse was brought into focus with the news late that summer of the passing of former NME writer Deli for Deli. I talked about that fairly early in the channel's history, so check that out for more about how that affected me and gave me the push to get discellany up and running. What else can I say? We stayed safe, we stayed healthy, and we watched the whole thing unfold along with everyone else. Me and my wife, both biology graduates, kept apace with the scientific side of the pandemic and watched dismayed as the politicians got things wrong over and over and over. In short, a grim time, some difficult days to get through. But here we are, and in the end, that's the only thing that matters really. I should talk about music, I guess, with the huge caveat that music in 2020, recorded, live, everything, was decimated. Tours cancelled, releases postponed, hence not a lot to talk about that. But here goes anyway. First, something familiar to viewers of the channel, that's me rattling on about Wire. This is Mind Hive, an album that got ahead of the pandemic by a month or two, coming out at the end of January. A great record, balanced perfectly between pulsing, pointy post-punk and blissed Eno-esque mood pieces. You can check out my primer video for a few track recommendations from this one. Second up, and this one got pushed back from March to June, I think, due to the first wave of lockdowns. It's Kariki and their debut self-titled album. I'm still missing a physical of this, but never mind. It's Ian Mackay, his wife Amy Farina, and Joe Lally in a band that sits perfectly at the point where Fugazi brush up against Ian and Amy's Evans project. Less of the coruscating, explosive fury of Fugazi, although tracks like BQM do hint at that. More of a slinky, ruminative focus with vocals shared between all three members. If you're missing Fugazi and you appreciate the more nuanced direction they took from Red Medicine onwards, there's plenty here to get your teeth into. It smoulders rather than burns, but pull up close, get warm, and lose yourself staring into the glowing embers. And so on to my pick. In a year that's probably best embodied by themes of distance, of isolation, of unease, of noise and stillness somehow occupying the same space, this is the one that captures 2020 the best for me. A two-word title as well that eerily summarises lockdown life. This is FACS and Void Moments. Released on March the 27th, that's the day after the first UK lockdown began. It may not be a record about COVID, but it sure feels like a record of COVID. Or maybe more precisely of the times that gave rise to COVID. Peak culture wars, Trump's first term, the Johnson government, that sense of dislocation, of an angry, divided society, a collapsing consensus, chaos. FACS are a Chicago three-piece of, on this record, singer-guitarist Brian Case, formerly of 90 Day Men and Disappears, Aliana Kalaba on bass, and Noah Ledger on drums. Void Moments is a cold, disturbing listen. Post-punk in the vein of Metal Box era Pill, or closer even maybe to the eerie experimentalism of This Heat circa Deceit. A gloomy collage of colossal drums, refractive slivers of guitar that phase in and out of reality, woozy, teetering bass lines, and Case's voice, semi-spoken, often treated, haranguing, narrating from the wings. The icy barbarity of the mix, the way the instruments stab at each other, and a spectacular use of the stereo soundstage to further separate and antagonise, give the album a throwback goth feel. Think Bauhaus and their alienating blankness, or maybe Joy Division at their most shapeless. Atrocity Exhibition, I Remember Nothing. The relentless nihilism of pornography-era Cure, even. But those are just the sonic precedents. Circling back to Pill and This Heat, it's the experimentation, the daring, the tipping over into barely corralled chaos of those two bands that seems to better describe where FACS are coming from. There are tighter, controlled passages. The skittering, crab-like back and forth of opener Boy starts out almost danceable, but slides into a smeared impressionistic gallop midway, ending on a question mark. Teenage Hive dive bombs from a very precise dubby opening into a scouring My Bloody Valentine-like glide. And the clammy, tribal, killing joke feel of casual indifference eventually succumbs to buzzing bass and backwards drum hits and ghostly whale song guitar. This is FACS' pattern here on this album. Set things up, build a foundation, then push hard and see how far things bend before breaking. And sometimes things deform very quickly, and that to me is when the record gets really interesting. Running at just over 6 minutes each, both Version and Void Walker demonstrate the band's instincts for improvisatory excursions, both tipping over into clangorous Sonic Youth-style burnouts. The closing seconds of Version even leave in Case's concerned plea over the talkback to the engineer Sanford Parker. He says, "Sanford, did you record that?" And I think that's what I like about FACS and about this record in particular. There's a feeling of spontaneity in what they do that never feels indulgent or misguided. Some will yearn for more songs, more structure, more melody, In that case, I'd direct you towards last year's suggestion of Corridor's Junior album. But in a year shaped by not knowing, by fear, by separation from, or confinement with others, there's something cathartic about hearing a record that embraces alienation, conflict, and yes, uncertainty, and rings out such a potent sense of drama using bold, instinctive, uncaring strokes. Yeah, it's a difficult record for a difficult year, but this is worth revisiting. 2020, not so much. FACS and Void Moments. I'd be interested to know how many of you have heard this one, because I still think they're a little under the radar. Maybe that will change this year because of the notoriety of them being the last act to be recorded by Steve Albini before his death earlier this year. Yeah, comments down below. What do you think of this one, or what was your album in the year that COVID hit? Please feel free to share your lockdown experiences too, if you want to. And that's it for this week. That's the end of the video. Please leave a like if you can, and if you've enjoyed the video, of course. And think about subscribing if you haven't done so already. I will catch you again very soon back here on the channel. Please take care. Bye for now.